What's up, guys? My name is Mike, and welcome back to a very special episode of Let's Play Hearts of Iron 4, our Learn About Canada edition. So I want to spend this episode and the next couple talking about some true Canadian war heroes. And I don't think we did justice to Buzz Burling in the last episode, so I'm going to start from scratch with him, as I promised, including why such a great Canadian hero icon, war hero icon, and tremendous pilot nearly got his ass court-martialed while stationed in France. So before we get into that, I'm just making sure we got everything on point here. We've got our mopping up the last little bit of nationalist Spain down here. We've got 5 divisions down there doing that for us. The other 18 of our divisions are still fighting in Europe. I've frozen this front line. We got to get these guys untrapped. We've got a bunch of guys trapped, but there is a port here. So what we could probably do is just make an escape. So if I were to say, pull them back, and then bring them over here by boat, we can just get them out of there so we don't have to bother trying to fight through some of this mess. That would probably make more sense, right? Alright, so let's do that. So let's talk about George Buzz Burling, the Falcon of Malta. So we went into a lot of his war bond drive stuff in the last episode, but I want to kind of start from scratch, including some of the more interesting points of his personal history. So first of all, as I mentioned, Buzz Burling originally, he had signed up for... Oh no, don't you dare. He originally had signed up to fight with the Royal Canadian Air Force. However, everybody come back here. You asshole, you're going all the way back there, aren't you? You dumb sons of bitches. Get over here. He had originally tried to sign up to fight with the Royal Canadian Air Force, but again, because the output, or the outpouring of support for the army was so huge, right post declaration of war, they could afford to be picky, and they didn't have enough, as we talked about before, they didn't have enough officers, they didn't have enough trained, didn't have enough even uniforms to outfit, so they were really picky. So they turned him down. What turned out to be one of the greatest pilots of all time, they turned him down because he didn't have an education, and that was a requirement for being part of the Air Force. We're going to go with, we're out of manpower, so we're going to go, what are we at right now, 5%? What's the 10% one? Service by requirement. Yeah, we're going to take a hit on factory output, construction speed, and training time, but it's worthwhile. We need those men in the bank. That's for goddamn sure. And we're also short on oil, of all things. So we'll grab some from our good buddies in the U.S. Lots of oil to go around, I hope. There we go. Perfect. So he was turned down by the Canadian Air Force. So pissed off, he swore oaths of vengeance against Canada, against his homeland, and made his way over to the UK around 1940. And of course, like I said, the UK was more than happy to have him. They were extensively fighting against the Germans over the English Channel, and they really they needed all the help they could get for sure. And at that point, Canada, of course, was not heavily involved in the war at all. As much as they tried to be, just wasn't happening. I don't want to push too far and get myself cut off here. That would be stupid. So you have to manage this a little bit better. Are our troops down here done yet? Still going. Okay, that's fine. So he was kind of flying almost in the tradition of those World War I pilots we talked about at the very beginning. So guys like Billy Bishop, who, World War I air combat was very different from World War II. World War I was very much sort of a solo effort because air piloting at the time was so new and so not understood, the tactics of flying in the air and fighting in the air. So, World War II, by the time World War II rolled around, air combat had evolved tremendously into very tight, squadron-type formations, and very different tactics than what it was in World War I. However, this guy, Buzz Burling, he was kind of a throwback to the old days. So he was flying these sorties over the English Channel against the German planes. And, they were basically just trying to implore him, you need to stick with everybody else. You got to stay in formation. You got to do this. And he just went off and did his own thing. He shot down a lot of Germans doing it, but, he still went off and did his own thing and kind of fought almost a solo war on his own across the channel and pissed off the Brits to no end because he was just so insubordinate. Really good, but so insubordinate. So eventually they got tired of his antics, got tired of him trying to fight his own little solo war all over the English Channel, and they shipped him off to Malta, which was a tiny little island. Where is Malta? Is it this island? I've got a feeling it's this one. Malta, yeah, I got it right first try. How about that? Geography, bitches. So Malta's a tiny little island. There was a key sort of airfield between the Axis forces in Europe and the Allied forces in North Africa. And it was a key part of the sort of North African campaign for sure. So they shipped him off to Malta, and Malta was more along his speed. So as opposed to flying in these super regimented, organized sorties over on the English Channel, it was more a case that he could just fly in this sort of tight island combat formations, which he much preferred. And again, his aptitude for flying was just legendary. So we already mentioned things like he was probably a little bit autistic, no offense intended, of course, but just the way he went about his business. So he was obsessed with angles, obsessed with geometry, obsessed with math. He had a notebook in his possession at all times where he would constantly be writing down almost like mathematical formulas, like, you know, if the enemy plane is going this direction, this speed, this bearing, I have to turn this way with this plane, this way with this plane, and he could, you know, turn on a dime, you know, lead his shots and shoot down enemy fighters, all while intuitively also by formula. And this really showed off in this sort of island hopping combat. Fall of Rome. Okay, good, fantastic. Thank you, Brits, for launching that invasion. Much appreciated. We're gonna take Seville, and maybe we can do our part and make Spain collapse. That'd be good. So yeah, I mean, he was great at this sort of combat, with much more suiting for his style, his personality. And he spent almost 6 months there, and by his own recollection, he absolutely loved it. Everywhere he turned, there was Germans in the sky, and you know, it was just an absolute love. And that's when he really became a hero in many cases, and one of Canada's first war heroes to kind of counterbalance a lot of the disasters from the early war. Okay, so 1942 to 3 rolls around. He's sent home to go into this Canadian war bond drive. So, you know, Mackenzie King is basically in love with him. Fall of Paris. Oh, shit. You weren't paying attention. That's okay. We can take back Paris. Let's make Spain capitulate, and then we'll take back Paris, I think. One Axis power at a time. Germany's almost completely fucked anyway, so I think we're in good shape. So after the war bond drive, which he also showed off some of his, you know, extreme eyesight. He could pick out a girl from across a busy street and nail her eye color correctly, just as well as he could pick out, you know, count a squadron of, say, like 38 bombers coming in that before anybody else could see. He could basically just pick them out before anybody else even saw them coming, and he could count them. So his eyesight was legendary, which obviously helped his ability as a pilot as well. So the war bond drive was over, and you know, he wanted to get back to combat. He was tired of doing the war bond thing. He was, by all cases, you know, a little bit reclusive as well, a little bit of a strange guy, and he just wanted to go back to fighting. He was born to fly. So you know what, they basically sent him back for training. They sent him back to Britain and basically just got him doing a lot of the training stuff for other pilots, basically figuring like, look, if he can fly that well, we need you to teach other people your methodology. Teach them this math that you're doing. Teach them whatever you're writing down in that notebook. Help us out that way. So he obliged for a while, but, you know, eventually hated it. And then he finally, you know, bored out of his mind doing the teaching role, finally turned back to the Canadians, who at this point he had completely forgiven, completely forgiven his own home country. Basically said, look, let me quit the Royal Air Force, the British Air Force. Let me sign up with Canada. Let me do what I do best. They say, you know what? Okay, fine. He's in love again. Perfect. But this is just kind of the start of where things start to go wrong, even worse for him. So first thing, obviously this guy's a bit of a reputation. He shows up the first day. His commander, with no bones about it, first thing he says to him is basically like, look, buddy, we fly as a team here. We don't want any of this sort of solo cowboy shit. You have to either, you know, work as a team or you don't work at all. And he goes, you know what? Okay, boss. That's literally the quote from him. He says, okay, boss, with a big smile on his face. And then first thing he does, of course, is go off on his own. So he's already got, you know, a lot of bad strikes against him. And this was flying over France. So at this point, they're flying missions over France, trying to bomb the German holdings and bases and so on and so forth. And then, you know, one of the things that really got him in huge trouble and kind of led to his, I wouldn't say ouster from the Army, or ouster from the Air Force, but certainly contributed to his lack of fans in the Air Force, was they specifically put, now I don't know where this rule came from, but there was a specific rule put in place where there would be absolutely no stunt diving or stunt flying over the airbase. So you can imagine, and I'm going to just go ahead and guess. I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to go ahead and guess this rule is probably put in place for a reason. You never get these weird rules whenever there's no reason. So chances are either he or somebody else got themselves in trouble doing exactly this. So you can imagine exactly what happened next is he got himself caught doing stunt flying over the base in France. He didn't give a shit. Didn't give a fuck. And, when he landed, of course, the airbase commander was just all over his ass saying, what the hell are you doing? You have to do this and that. This is insane. You're going to court-martial you. And his only reply was like a scorned, angsty teenager. You can't tell me what to do. He literally said, you can't tell me what to do. Fuming, this commander started the court-martial process for him, wanted to slap him in chains, wanted to arrest him. To which the secondary commander said, Prime Minister Mackenzie King, he just crowned Buzz Burling King of Canada. You can't court-martial this guy. And not obviously literally King of Canada, but figuratively in his spirit was, Canada's poster boy for the war effort. Eventually, they took off the arrest. They changed it just to simply a grounding, and they put him back on escort duty over the English Channel, where he would escort all the Canadian fighters were escorting the huge American bombers as they made bombing runs of Europe. But he considered this to be, far, far beneath him. He called them taxi rides over the channel. And he resigned. He was so tired of just this sort of what he would consider grunt work, so far beneath him. How come the fuck France isn't capitulating? God damn it. Pardon me, not France. Spain. Fucking capitulate, you pieces of shit. There we go. We're going to take these guys out, and then we're going to cross back over the channel. We've got research that we need to do. This is a year ahead. Let's grab the engineers. And let's grab what? We'll grab this. Get some more resources for ourselves. So he resigned. He went back to the Royal Air Force, the British Air Force. They wouldn't have him. They were done with him. He went back. He even went to the Americans themselves, straight to the Americans. They wanted nothing to do with him. So he had already gotten a reputation for... is that what I want to do? Yeah, let's come across here. He already gotten himself quite an international reputation for being a bit of a hothead and impossible to manage or command, and nobody wanted anything to do with him. Poor guy. So he does what he does best. He goes back home. He starts. He opens up his own flight school, and for a while he does that until post-war. So 1947 or so, he's running his own flight school. Never returns to the European War, and nationalist Spain finally fucking capitulates. So what became of Mr. George Buzz Burling? Well, unfortunately, his story doesn't have too much of a happy ending. So getting bored of his flight school, in 1948, we'll put these guys over there, and then we're going to try to push back against the Italians. We're going to stop this advance into France. One axis down, more to go. Two more to go, I guess. So he started his own flight school, got bored of that. 1948, Israel goes to war against 5 of his Arab neighbors. Buzz signs up, or not really signs up, but he basically signs himself up, commits himself to going over to help them, and kind of smuggles himself out of Canada to go fight for Israel in the Middle East. Now, Buzz was also famously hard to kill. And this is really important as we kind of talk about his unfortunate end here. Should we do planes or should we do boats? It was commented at the time that the poor guy had 9 lives because he had 9 different incidences where he crashed, he was shot up, he parachuted out, smashed into water, 9 different crash landings, 9 different times he was shot down, pulling some insane maneuvers. For example, over Sicily, he had to pull up on his plane so hard his eyeballs hemorrhaged and he blacked out and went blind for a short amount of time before coming to and then just barely able to save himself. These aren't mine, right? No, there's Americans. Poor Americans trapped there. So famously hard to kill after 9 crashes, and he, like I said, he famously was said to have had 9 lives. In fact, on his tour of Canada, the War Bond tour, he was limping due to his war. He had too much shrapnel in his legs, and ended up having to limp his way through a lot of the events. So on his way to Israel, he smuggled himself out. Was just going to go sign up and just fight for Israel as a pilot. Completely off the books because he figured they would welcome him into their ranks. Decided to make a stop in Rome where he was actually testing out a new Canadian plane design, took it for a test ride. To this day, nobody knows exactly what happened except for observers say that the fuel tank underneath caught fire and the whole plane came down in flames. Nobody ever figured out why this happened or how it happened, but unfortunately for poor George, He only had 9 lives, and he used them all up. So on his 10th crash landing, he was sadly killed in a routine training / test drive of this Canadian plane in Rome. Nonetheless, a great Canadian hero, and really sort of embodied that Canadian spirit at the time of World War II. All right, this episode's gone on way too long, so I'm going to take a break here. And the next episode, we're going to talk about a secondary Canadian pilot who may have had more lives than George Buzz Burling, as well as a few of my homies from Vancouver, known as the Three Musketeers, who really changed the face of naval combat during World War II. So thanks so much for joining me, guys. Much love, big kisses, and we'll talk to you soon.